A few Shabbats ago, when my colleague and former camper, Rabbi Hannah Kingston, finished leading services at Alith Gardens, Rabbi Marmer's former pulpit, a congregant she had never met before walked up to her and said, "You don't know me. I like what you say, but I mostly like how you look." To which she smiled and walked away. We all know 100 stories like this when women we all respect and care for were subject to over-flattery or non-flattering comments, when attentions moved from friendly to overly friendly. In another synagogue, one of my colleagues was known as the rabbi with the nice legs. We all know many stories like these, from stories of celebrities and politicians to our own stories which we've seen or heard or experienced when someone crossed the line. In some stories, everyone knew except for the young intern. In others, no one knew because no one spoke up. In our parashah this week, we also have a repeating story, one that has been problematic for the Jewish people for at least 1,000 years, and that is the sister wife story. What is the sister wife story? It appears 3 times in the book of Genesis, in Genesis 12, 20, and 26, and it goes something like this. It's slightly different in each of its retellings, but these are the main building blocks. That there was a famine in the land, which caused our patriarch and his family to need to travel south. As they are walking south, the patriarch turns to his wife and says, "Wow, you are rather good looking, and I'm just realizing this now." Of course, all of our patriarchs are late in years at this point, and so that says, the rabbis say it's about the modesty of the patriarchs, right? But wow, you are so good looking. If we're going into a different land, if these uncouth southern barbarians see you, they're going to kill me and take you. I'm concerned about my life, so please lie and tell them that you're my sister, and then I can survive. When they arrive, the people in the south realize how beautiful the wife is and either take her or threaten to take her, and then God steps in, realizing their mistake. The people in the south then restore the wife to Abraham or Isaac, and the real purpose of the story, according to scholars, and give them lots of money as well, and then tell them to go on their way. According to scholars, including a professor of mine, Rabbi Satz's, Rabbi David Aaron, this is a case of rewritten scripture, where an original story had so many gaps in it that the authors needed to change it in order to get rid of some of those opportunities for others to fill in with unsavory narratives. So, for instance, in this story, Abraham and Isaac's love for their spouses, what's going on with that? Maybe our matriarchs actually were taken into the households of these other kings, and then what happened to them in those homes while their husbands stood by and profited. And there's all of these questions about the character which happened. So the story gets retold, and in the later 2 retellings, some of these holes are plugged and fixed. We see this story not only these 3 times in the book of Genesis, in our Tanakh, but also twice in the Dead Sea Scrolls. One retelling is in the book of Jubilees, and the longest, most expansive retelling is in the Genesis Apocryphon, a book written with different stories which tell you what were the matriarchs and patriarchs thinking throughout the journey. Actually, I spent some time with the Genesis Apocryphon when I was at HUC, looking at the scroll and the pictures of the scroll and in translations of it, and it provides a lot of cover for Abraham. That he went south only after much meditation, and only because they were looking for such a great scribe, and they wanted someone to teach them true knowledge. It's the only reason he went south, knowing the culture as it was. And as soon as he heads south with his sister, who's really his wife, the people in the kingdom come and tell the king about Sarah. Here's the description that the king's advisors give him. How irresistible and beautiful is the image of her face, and how lovely her forehead. Soft the hair of her head, how graceful are her eyes, and how precious her nose. Every feature of her face is radiating beauty. How lovely is her breast, and how beautiful her white complexion. As for her arms, how beautiful they are, and her hands, how perfect they are. Every view of her hands is stimulating. How graceful are her palms, and how long and thin are the fingers of her hands. Her legs are of such beauty, and her thighs are so perfectly apportioned. There is not a virgin or bride who enters the bridal chamber more beautiful than she. Her beauty surpasses that of all women, since the height of her beauty soars above them all. And alongside her beauty, she possesses great wisdom. Everything about her is lovely. And so the king desires her and takes her. They try to kill Abraham. And she shouts out, "No, he is my brother." So instead, they make him rich. There's a lot of high praise for her wisdom in this. It's good. Lots of lines of poetry about her wisdom. It's really nice. There are two themes I want to focus on in this story. The first is the idea of the culture of the place. And the second is the role and really the passivity of the woman in the story. So why do Abraham and Isaac turn to their wives and say, you are my sister? Because the rabbis tell us they are cognizant, they know they're entering into a different culture. That beauty is cultural, and that rules of civility are also cultural. We know this from shifts in our own culture as well, as mores moved from the Edwardian era into the roaring 20s, the long 60s, into where we are today. One of the projects I'm working on has me reading sermons from rabbis from the early 1900s. This is a sermon by a prominent leading progressive reform rabbi in New York City from the year 1907. The universe is based upon two elements, the masculine and the feminine. This is the dual nature of all creation. Man and woman, each has his particular place in the world, and each must abide in it. Women's natural sphere is... You've read this. Wow, that's good. Her domain is spiritual more than material. Religion and morals rather than business and speculation. Purity and simplicity above the dross and ostentation of social victories. The home of the man may be the world, and the world of the woman must be the home. The poem that you read, who was the name of the poet? Amy Blank. So there's a really interesting bit of history of the rabbinical school of Hebrew Union College, where there were women students as early as the 1900s, and these women students were often the wives or the children of the professors and of the rabbis that were there, and they take all of the courses. Some of them are sent out to high holy day pulpits and sent to preach and have student pulpits. And in the 1920s, the rabbinical school, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the rabbinic organization says, can we accept women as rabbis? And they say, yes. They say, of course we can. There's no reason we can't accept women as rabbis. We have some great students coming up. And if only someone would ordain them. And the college said, not us. Not us. Did the UAHC say what I was? Well, there you go. So So there was this conversation. But interestingly, so looking for these women in history, a lot of them, their biographies end as soon as this decision comes down, right? We can't find, there's not much history around them, and their papers that are kept end at this period. So just a look back at at that poem, right? So this has nothing to do with Rabbi Silverman, who gave this sermon in New York City in 1907. Who was a progressive. In fact, and the connection with that poem is that he is talking about strong women. His sermon is about strong women and the role of the women preserving Judaism and keeping the home together from generation to generation. And in fact, his sermon is about trying to create a sisterhood for his congregation. This is when sisterhoods began, synagogues, and this was one of the sermons given around that time. Right? So he's looking to empower women, but within the culture and framework of the time. And for him, his culture is his excuse. Just like for Pharaoh and Abimelech, their culture is their excuse. Abraham knew the culture when he went south. Isaac was prepared. And they prepared their wives to endure the abuse they would likely encounter, to smile and walk away if possible. Or really, in this case, it was to grin and bear it, because with the famine in the story set up, it was either suffer under another man or likely die. And that is the second part that I want to focus on in this parashah, the passivity of the woman in this trope, in this narrative. The divine drama is unfolding around them. In the first Abraham drama, Sarah goes, lives in Pharaoh's house, does what is needed of her, and only when God intervenes does Sarah get returned to Abraham. In the Isaac story, Rebekah is there following along. A man is about to go out and lay with her, and then Abimelech sees Isaac fondling his wife and calls the whole thing off. The women are here and are passive. They're silent in the face of the culture around them. Their husbands aren't directly their harassers here, but the men, are happy to let the culture continue if it means not sticking their necks out. And the women follow their lead. And this is the shift we're witnessing around us at this moment in our history. That culture surrounding us today has once again shifted. Known harassers are being named. Things that were just creepy and icky are now being raised as possibly criminal or unworthy of those for whom we hold our respect. The bar has been lifted. The hashtag #MeToo in recent weeks has been a way for women to speak out. Abuse and harassment that was once silent is now getting voice. Inappropriate touching, hands on knees when hands have no business being on knees, comments that were once tactless, yet one could smile through, are now inappropriate. Men are doing mental inventories. When might I have crossed the line? When might I have made someone uncomfortable, put someone in a situation they felt they couldn't speak up or say no in? When was the power with me and not with my intern, my student, my mentee? What did I say that I should not have? And thus, as we censor a bit more, our actions and our words, we retract ourselves, do tzimtzum, so that others who once felt oppressed can rise up out of a place of fear and live with physical and emotional safety. And that's what this is about, making sure that everyone can live in a place of physical and emotional security and safety. Rabbi Kingston at Aleph knows that by speaking out, it will inspire others to do the same. When you have a chorus of voices, it is easier to join in, she says. When you have a chorus of voices, it is easier to join in. Today, we add Sarah and Rebecca's names to the chorus. Them too. When we have a chorus of voices, it's easier to join in. Shabbat Shalom.